Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and a brand new video. This week's video we will be attempting to answer the age-old question, that being, can you make a quality piece of furniture, in this instance a table, out of pine lumber? So I'll walk you through the steps of this table build, and while I certainly have an opinion on using pine lumber for tables and furniture, what I really want to get out of this video is your opinion. So if you do have an opinion on using pine or 2x6s, 2x4s, or any type of construction lumber for furniture pieces, let me know in the comments and let's get a discussion going on what everybody thinks. Alright, so as I mentioned, this entire table will be built from 2x6 construction grade lumber. And the first thing I needed to do with these 2x6 boards were to mill them up, so I do that with the joiner, planer, and table saw. And a quick word about these 2x6s, they are nothing special. They are just off of the rack down at my local Lowe's. And while I did try to pick out the straightest boards, it's always a hit or miss at what you're going to get from the box store. The legs for this table are from Carolina Leg Company. Now I'm not sure if they use construction grade lumber, but I needed the legs to be the same species of wood as the tabletop and apron so that the stain and finish would match up on everything. So I'm assembling the apron to the legs using dominoes, which is the easiest method by far for me. But in the midst of using these pine legs with the pine apron, we first need to address the elephant in the room, which is, why the heck am I using pine lumber anyway? Despite how good this dado groove looks as a detail feature of the frame, the reason I'm using pine is not because of the dado groove or any of the other decorations on this table. The reason that I'm using pine is because of a little known fact that not many people are aware of. And that fact that I just found out through some extended research is that pine, surprisingly, is actually the first species of tree that was ever on the planet Earth. Which means that all pine tables have a spiritual connection with a positive aura in tide, since it was the first species on the Earth.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
And now that I have been awarded 0 points and everyone is now dumber for having listened to that, the real reason that I'm using pine for this table comes down to two things. The first being the color of the table, and the second is that the budget this table build is supposed to stay within. So here on the screen is a quick picture of the image of the table that I was provided with when I was asked to build this table. And the recipient of the table did end up picking a different stain color, but they wanted the table to be all the same color rather than a white painted base on the bottom. I strongly prefer to use these legs from Carolina Leg Company that you see me using. The issue with these legs is that Carolina Leg Company only offers them in pine or maple. And since our goal for this table is all one stain color, those are my only two options. So whenever I looked into how much materials would cost, I ended up quoting the recipient about 3 times as much to build this from maple as I did from pine. Ultimately, they ended up choosing the pine. And I haven't built a pine table base or tabletop in a while, so I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to take the time and see if we could make a high quality table out of pine construction lumber. Just like the base and frame, the tabletop will also be made from these construction grade 2x6s. And despite once again digging through the stack to find the straightest boards, when I got these home, they all seem to be warped and twisted and cupped. So we'll have to mill these up once again like we did those earlier boards, starting with the face and then the edge on the joiner before moving over to the planer, and then finally the table saw to square up that last edge. Despite the stigma of using pine for tabletops, I think the pine can actually be a really pretty wood and have a very nice grain pattern. Looks kind of rustic and unique with all the knots, and a lot of people love the look of this as a tabletop. So looks aside, pine does however pose a couple challenges whenever using it as a tabletop or a piece of furniture. The first being that pine is a softwood, which means exactly what it sounds like. The wood is much softer than your hardwood species such as maple, oak, or walnut, and the surfaces are much more likely to scratch, dent, or scuff because of the wood's softness. The other main challenge with using this lumber, and not necessarily pine, but just more of construction grade lumber, is that this wood has not been properly dried regardless of what the description of Lowe's or Home Depot says with it being kiln dried. If you were able to measure the moisture content of these boards, it would probably be a little higher than we typically like. So the moisture doesn't necessarily affect the workability of these boards, and since I have a wider planer, I can glue everything up and then plane it down to get a perfect surface on both of these slabs before joining them. The problem with the moisture content is that these boards will move and shrink over time, and we all know that wood movement is the absolute crux of woodworking. While you can sometimes get away with a little wood movement on the piece of apron or leg, a tabletop that's about 40 inches wide will tend to bow or cup in one direction, which can leave the tabletop crooked, warped, and make it look like it wasn't assembled properly. So to prevent the warping or twisting, we need to somehow still let these boards expand and contract, but somehow keep them flat on the same plane. Now on a normal tabletop, you'll often see breadboards added to the ends of the table, and this is the exact purpose of the breadboards, to keep everything flat on the same plane, but allow those internal boards to expand and contract. On this table, however, breadboards were not a feature built into the design, so I had to come up with a different idea on how to keep these boards straight. The solution I came up with was to route a dovetail groove on the underside of the table in two pieces, then cut a dovetail tongue on a different board that would act as a spine up underneath the underside of the table to support all those pieces, essentially keeping the tabletop flat. So I left this board with the dovetail tongue about 3.5 inches wide. So since this board is stronger, it won't bow across the length of the tabletop. And as those tabletop boards expand and contract, they can slide in that dovetail groove, but they'll be forced to be pinned flat by that spine support board. So I thought this was a clever trick, but in reality, I ended up failing to plan this out properly, because I originally wanted these underside support rails to set all the way up against the outside of the apron, but I forgot that the inside of the legs would be in the way. So a quick and easy solution was to cut a small fraction of that spine piece out. That way when the board was put back in place, it would set on top of those legs rather than be in the way. Now obviously if I would have slowed down and just realized that I needed to cut that inside groove closer to the center of the table, I wouldn't have had this issue. But usually during a build I mess up at least once or twice, and I hadn't made any mistakes yet, so this was a good place to get that mistake out of the way. Because this tabletop is only glued together at that center joint, there's no glue up underneath that dovetail, meaning that these construction grade boards will be free to expand and contract as they need to without causing any internal stress, cracks, and fractures to the tabletop. Alright, so at this point in the video, I believe we have technically answered the question of can you make a table from pine construction lumber? Because, well, if you've been watching the video, you can clearly see that we have a table made from pine lumber. So we've answered that question, but the next question is, can we make this table look good? So in an attempt to answer that question, we'll do everything we can to this table to fancy it up a little bit. Meaning that we sand all the surfaces down very nicely, we take a router, we clean up all the edges with a nice round over bit to soften the profile, but also to make this look like a finished piece of furniture. One good thing about pine is that for the most part, it's a very workable type of wood. meaning that it sands down and takes stain very well. And as I am staining the tabletop here, it is worth mentioning that whitewood pine, which is what these 2x6s are made from, is much easier to work with and takes stain so much better than yellow southern pine, which is typically what you'll see 2x8s, 2x10s, and 2x12s made from. So while not necessarily specific to pine construction lumber, the finishing process with the stain and the polyurethane is essential and a very important step to make sure that the table looks as good as possible when we're finally finished. The best way to get a high quality finish with polyurethane is to use multiple coats, sanding, cleaning in between each step. And if you're interested in getting the best finish, you can check out the video at the top of the screen, as I previously did a video on this to show you how to get a perfect polyurethane finish. But anyway, going the extra mile to make sure that your finish is as good as possible on the table is really a way to make sure that your table looks great regardless of what species you're using. So if you are using pine construction boards like I am, finishing off that tabletop with a couple coats of high gloss or satin polyurethane is a fantastic way to give your table that wow factor. So at this point we have a finished tabletop and a finished table base, so obviously we will need to put the two together. And I like to do this with Z-clips, once again respecting the fact of wood movement as those boards will expand and contract. So the Z-clips will help us pin the tabletop down to the base rather than bolting it to the apron with the use of screws or some other hardware that won't allow it to move. Regardless of the wood species, this is an important factor in attaching tabletops. And since we couldn't get a Z-clip on the outside, we can just use screws to attach the spine to the apron. So is it possible to build a table from 2x6s or 2x4s that you get from Lowe's or Home Depot? The answer to that is yes, absolutely, as we just proved in this video. But the original question of this video was, can you make a high quality piece of furniture out of 2x6s? That's a question that I will leave up to you to decide, so please drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. But I will say that I used every trick that I know to make this table the best I could, and I was very happy with the end result. So if you did make it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found the content useful. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.